You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. At the end of this show, you're going to get the interview that I did with David Kaiser, the author of the book on the 1965 NFL season. Very nice guy, very smart, very passionate. I really like talking to him. But even though there was an NFL game yesterday, one that resulted in a huge upset win, we've had a lot of those recently, nice to see, that's not the NFL story that I'm going to start with. It's not the biggest one. The biggest NFL story is the Los Angeles Rams coming out of nowhere to sign Odell Beckham Jr. Here's how the contract breaks down. Beckham's getting a $500,000 signing bonus, $750,000 for the rest of the season, and then $3 million can be obtained via team-based incentives. So all told, Beckham can get $4.25 million. Say what you want about Odell Beckham Jr., and I certainly have my issues with him, but this is an absolutely fantastic move by the Rams. It's impossible to look at that Rams team now with the addition of OBJ and not look at that team as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Think about their quartet of receivers. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, and OBJ. You throw in Tyler Higbee, who's a really good tight end, having a good season. On paper, that's one of the best offenses in NFL history. It really is. With Matthew Stafford at the helm, Darrell Henderson as the starting running back, Sonny Michel as the backup running back, Sean McVay as the head coach, Kevin O'Connell as the offensive coordinator. That offense has the potential to put up 40 points a game. It really does. They're already putting up 29 points per game. I think we can count Beckham as being good for 10 more points. Let's say a touchdown and a field goal. The Rams are doing something that really hasn't been done a lot in the NFL. The Eagles tried it a while back, and it ended disastrously. While we'll have to wait and see if this ends differently, For now, we just have to marvel at this ungodly assemblage of talent that the Rams have assembled. Make no mistake about it. This is a super team. You want to tell me that the Buccaneers put together a super team? Okay, you can make that argument. Little different, though. The Buccaneers built their super team around one guy, Tom Brady. And he brought in his friends, guys like Gronk and Antonio Brown. It is a super team, there's no question, but it's a little different. And it's also on the older side. These superstars that the Rams have, throw in Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, and Von Miller also. They're all in the primes of their career. Like, realistically, there is nothing stopping these guys from staying together for the next 3 years or so. To have all this talent under one roof is just absolutely insane. I feel sorry for the Cardinals. I feel sorry for the Seahawks. I feel sorry for the Niners. There is no way on this earth that the Rams aren't winning the NFC West. Nothing is stopping them from running the table and going 15-2. Nothing stopping them from going on a magical run in the playoffs. Any team that they go up against, with the exception of maybe the Buccaneers, and even then, it's really, really close, will have a roster on paper that can compete with the Rams. Think about it this way. A while ago, the Rams cut Desean Jackson. They replaced him with OBJ. If that doesn't constitute a massive upgrade, I don't know what does. Now look, Beckham has his issues, okay? They're well documented. You don't need me to go through them. And it's fair to wonder how Beckham will deal with being on a team where he's not even the second best receiver. At this very moment, I'm putting Robert Woods over OBJ. I have to. I'll say that Beckham is better than Van Jefferson, even though the numbers would disagree with me, but I will put Beckham ahead of Jefferson. That makes Beckham the third best receiver that the Rams have. Maybe their fourth best pass catcher, depending on how you feel about Tyler Higbee. I'll tell you, it's closer than you think. It's fair to wonder how Beckham will deal with that. I mean, this guy didn't like being the second banana in the Browns offense. You really think he's gonna enjoy being the second banana in the Rams offense? Say what you want about how the Browns used OBJ, but there wasn't a game this year where he was on the field for less than half their snaps. On the Rams, I don't see that being the case. Unless they're going to use a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, Beckham's not going to be out there a ton. Like, here's the thing. You knew that OBJ was going to go to a team that would give him a great chance to win a Super Bowl. The Rams do that. There's no question about that. Did I think that the Rams would be the team to get OBJ? Absolutely not. But they gave him an excellent opportunity to win a Super Bowl. The thing is, though, while he may get a ring, how big a role is he going to play on that team? You want to tell me, oh, he's OBJ, he'll be used a lot, Sean McVay will find ways to use him? Okay, I get all that. But realize, he's the third or fourth option in that Rams passing attack. And let me ask you something. Who would you rather see get more run in the Rams offense? Odell Beckham Jr., who may not re-sign next season. In fact, he probably won't. I don't know what the Rams cap situation is like, but something tells me Beckham's gonna go to the highest bidder. There's nothing wrong with that. That's his right as a free agent. I'm just saying, I don't think he's going to re-sign with the Rams. So would you rather he get those targets? Or would you rather Van Jefferson get those targets? Someone who's clearly part of the Rams' future. I'll use the same logic for Tyler Higbee. You want to tell me OBJ is better than those guys? So you want him getting the targets regardless? Okay, I understand that. But there is a part of me that would rather see Jefferson and Higbee as focal points of the Rams' offense. Beckham coming in does cloud the situation a little bit. It's a move you have to make if you're the Rams, okay? If you're Les Snead and Odell Beckham reaches out to you and says, I am willing to play for the Los Angeles Rams, you kinda need to do it. There is risk, there's no question about that. But you need to respect the talent that Odell Beckham Jr. is. This guy can make catches that normal human beings just can't. Alright, is the guy a head case? The answer is yes. But so is Terrell Owens. A lot of teams put up with him. So was Randy Moss. A lot of teams put up with him. Beckham has moments that infuriate you. There's no question. But here's a guy who, when his head is screwed on straight, is just as good as any other receiver in the NFL. If you're Snead, and you've already gone all in for this year, sure, throw some money at Odell Beckham, let him rehab his stock a little bit. You know he's going to be motivated. A, to get a ring, but B, to put himself in position for a really big payday in 4 months. I mean, quite honestly, I could really see a team like the Jets going after Beckham when he hits free agency in March. Surround Zach Wilson or Mike White with as much offensive talent as possible, right? You can't forsake the defense, but the Jets are going to have a lot of cap space. They'd get to stick it to the Giants a little bit. I mean, think about this 1, 2, 3. Odell Beckham, Corey Davis, and Elijah Moore. That's incredible. I'm not saying that Beckham will come to the Jets. I'm just saying if I'm Joe Douglas in 4 months, I'm going after him. It was kind of funny. I saw some Giants fans saying, hey, watch, Beckham's going to go back to the Giants. He's going to help us rally to a playoff spot. The last place on earth Odell Beckham will go is the Giants. Alright, he's not going to go to the Giants. He's not going to go to the Browns. Come on. Like, this isn't people talking about free agency 4 months from now. This was people saying when Beckham was waived that the Giants could get him. Those people are idiots. Okay, it's just that simple. You had to know that wasn't going to happen. It made no sense for Beckham to go there. The guy wants to win a ring. The only way the Giants are winning a ring this year is in Madden. Hell, the Jets were more likely than the Giants. Never once did I think OBJ was going to sign with the Jets. 4 months from now? Very possible. When he was a free agent this week? No. But look, this is an outstanding move by the Rams. The assemblage of talent they have is just as good as any in the NFL. The only team that comes close to it is the Buccaneers. I don't want to say it's a slam dunk that Beckham is gonna go back to being the Beckham of old. As we know, he's a head case. And there's only one football. A lot of people need to get touches. Kupp, Woods, Jefferson, Higbee, Henderson. This does carry some risk, but it's impossible to not look at that Rams roster and have your jaw hit the floor. It is either the most talented or second most talented roster in the NFL. But now it's time to break down Ravens-Dolphins. A game that probably cost me my fantasy football matchups this week. I'm in 2 leagues. I'm in a dynasty league and a normal league. Both those leagues, I have Lamar Jackson. In the normal league, I had Marquise Brown. I started Marquise Brown. Come on, he's going to go off against the Dolphins secondary, right? The Dolphins aren't that good. Sure, Xavier Howard's great, no question. But Brown will get his. He's too talented not to. Lamar Jackson's going to go off. He's going to score 4 touchdowns. I'm going to win these matchups easily. Instead, Marquise Brown got held to just 6 catches for 37 yards. The Dolphins defense frustrated Lamar to no end. And the Dolphins pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the season. It's kind of funny. Week 8 had a big upset. The Jets beating the Bengals. Week 9 had a big upset. The Jaguars beating the Bills. This week already has its big upset. The Dolphins beating the Ravens. No one on earth had the Dolphins winning this game. There were people in Florida, people in Miami, that were picking the Ravens to win this game. How could you not? The Ravens were 6-2, one of the best teams in the AFC. The Dolphins were 2-7. They were in last place in the AFC East. They were a half game behind the Jets. But the Dolphins did an excellent job of getting pressure on Lamar. They really didn't let him run a ton. The guy only had 9 carries for 39 yards. He threw the ball 43 times. In a perfect world, you want Jackson throwing that ball less and running that ball more. Obviously, I'm not saying that Jackson can't throw it. Alright, but realistically, I'd like to see that number in the 35 range. And I'd like his carries to be in the 15 range. Instead, Jackson was forced to throw the ball more. He really wasn't that effective. He went just 26 for 43 for 238 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. That interception was late in the fourth quarter when Jackson was trying to make something happen. He was sacked 4 times. What's more impressive to me is the fact that the Dolphins were able to limit him to just 39 rushing yards. We know that Jackson has the ability to spring a run for huge yardage. You know what his longest run was? Yesterday? 11. That's not nothing, but it's not great. I mean, to put it in perspective, Devontae Freeman had 10 carries for 35 yards. His longest carry went for 12 yards. So think about it this way. Devontae Freeman had more carries than Lamar Jackson. That can't happen. Here's the thing. Most of Jackson's runs in a game come from him surveying the defense, not seeing anything, and then tucking in and running. Are there design quarterback runs? Absolutely, but more of his runs come from improvisation than design. And that's okay. When you have a talent like Lamar Jackson, you're okay with that. The thing is, though, once you see that Jackson isn't going to have the time to improvise and run roughshod with his legs, you've got to design some plays for him to do it himself. Whether it's a QB power right up the middle, whether it's him rolling out and trying to go off tackle, you've got to do something. The reality is, I'm not sure if Lamar Jackson has the arm necessary to kill you by itself. With his legs, it can kill you, no question. But once you take away his legs, he becomes beatable. He's not the best thrower in the NFL. He's not terrible. Let's put it this way. No one can look at Lamar Jackson and say that he's a running back. No, he's a quarterback. Okay? Period. Case closed. I don't want to hear any more about it. But I don't think you want Jackson being forced to throw the ball 40 times a game. That's just not a formula for victory if you're the Ravens. And you saw it. You saw it yesterday. Jackson got pressured. He was heated on the sidelines. Sammy Watkins may or may not have been able to catch a touchdown pass. It looked like he pulled up, but whether that was a conscious decision or he just blanked, he didn't know where he was. Maybe he thought he was already past the point of no return for trying to drag his feet. Maybe he never got a good look at the football. For whatever reason, Watkins just let a touchdown pass fall to the ground. Watkins could have had that. I'm not a big Sammy Watkins fan. I just don't think he's that great. But that should have been a touchdown. The fact that Watkins didn't catch it, that's a bad look. This guy only had one catch for 7 yards. You know what happened after that catch? He fumbled it. Gave the ball back to the Dolphins. Doesn't get much worse than that. The Dolphins defense did an absolutely fantastic job of limiting Lamar Jackson's effectiveness. Give Xavier Howard, Javon Holland, Justin Coleman, Christian Wilkins, Eric Rowe, Brandon Jones, Raekwon Davis, etc., all the credit in the world. The Ravens O-line, I thought, was absolutely dreadful. Jackson had no time to do anything. I mean, give the Dolphins credit. They had 2 quarterbacks look competent yesterday. Jacoby Brissett started, which I said he would. And at the very least, he looked competent. Alright, yes, he completed less than 50% of his passes, 11 for 23, but he did throw for 156 yards. He didn't turn the ball over. He wasn't awful. But Brissett got hurt, so that forced Tua to come in at less than 100%, still dealing with that finger injury. And he was able to sling the pigskin around. He completed 8 of his 13 passes for 158 yards. He was able to score the dagger rushing touchdown on a quarterback sneak with just over 2 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. That made the score 22-10. You had a sense that was going to be it. The Dolphins were actually going to win this game. After the touchdown pass to Mark Andrews, I really thought that the Ravens would come back. It's 15-10 Dolphins at this point. So all the Ravens need is for their defense to get the ball back to their MVP quarterback, give him a chance to drive down the field and win. I understand it's easier said than done, but I thought Jackson could do it. Instead, the Ravens defense just breaks down. No one picks up Albert Wilson as the motion man. And Wilson is able to take the ball 64 yards downfield. I don't want to say that iced the game right there, but it would have been a lot easier for Jackson if he had gotten the ball at around midfield. Not in his own red zone. Give the Dolphins credit for powering the ball in. Jackson was able to drive down the field, but he did throw the killer interception. Again, not his fault. He's trying to make something happen. But that's how the Ravens lost. One of the biggest upsets of the season. On a nationally televised game, the Dolphins were able to beat the Ravens. Jets-Bengals wasn't nationally televised. Jaguars-Bills wasn't nationally televised. Dolphins-Ravens this was a big win for them. It should give them confidence for the next couple weeks or so. As for the Ravens, they haven't looked great since coming back from their bye week. They were lucky to beat the Vikings. They lose to an inferior Dolphins team. For their sake, I hope they destroy the Bears next week. They really need a decisive win to right their ship. But now it's time for me to make my 3 NFL picks. A lot of things went wrong last week for me. Number 1, I didn't put in the sound effect. I don't know why I didn't. I know what to do in order to make it so I include it. I just didn't. That's an absolutely terrible job by me. Also, I gave you the wrong record last week. I think I said I was 11-14. That's impossible. I do 3 picks every week. So the wins and losses have to add up to a multiple of 3. That's just how it works. 25 is not a multiple of 3. 24 is. Also, I went 2-1. That's not bad, but I would like to go 3-0. This is the correct record. I am 13-14. Okay, that adds up to 27, which makes sense because this is week 10. So I've done 9 weeks of picks. 9 times 3 is 27. 13 plus 14 is 27. I feel a lot of pressure to have a winning record this week. Let me get back to 500 or even above 500. That would be nice. I like the Titans -3 over the Saints. I understand that the Titans are without Derrick Henry, but they did show last week that they don't need him to win. He certainly helps, there's no question. But the Titans were able to beat a great Rams team on Sunday night without him. The Saints are much worse than the Rams. Alvin Kamara's not at 100%. Trevor Siemian is going to get another start. He doesn't give me much confidence. Even though he was good against the Falcons, I just don't think he's a great quarterback. I think the Titans can make him work. I've got to go Titans -3. For my upset, I was thinking Browns +2.5. But 2.5 is really small. I want to go a little bigger. So believe it or not, I'm going to go with the Jaguars +10.5 against the Colts. It's hard to not have confidence in the Jaguars given what they did last week, limiting a great Bills offense. I mean, yeah, the Colts lit up the Jets on Thursday Night Football last week. Believe me, I was watching the game. But I think the Jaguars can cover a +10.5. Even if they lose 30-20, they'll cover +10.5. I like that spread. I really do. I don't think the Colts are that great. I understand that this game is in Indy, but I don't think it's out of the question that the Jaguars are righting the ship. They have won 2 out of their last 3. They do have a quarterback with a great future in Trevor Lawrence. They have a coach in Urban Meyer who I still like. Still have confidence in him. I understand all the extracurricular stuff, but I do like him. I think the Jaguars can cover plus 10.5. As for my last pick, I like the Rams minus 3.5. I understand that this game is in Santa Clara, but how on earth are the Niners favorites in this game? These are the Rams we're talking about. Sure, maybe they're not going to have OBJ. Sure, Von Miller's banged up. But do you need me to tell you again how great the Rams are? The Rams are going to win this game easily. They're going to win it by a touchdown. This could be Rams minus 6. I'd be tempted to pick them. Rams minus 3.5? That's an easy pick for me. So my picks are Titans minus 3, Jaguars plus 10.5, and Rams minus 3.5. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. There are 4 games happening tomorrow that feature 2 ranked teams. The first one is Oklahoma versus Baylor. I'm skeptical of Oklahoma. I've mentioned that before. I understand that they're undefeated, but the fact that they've needed to use 2 quarterbacks this year does scare me a little bit. Also, their defense is nothing to write home about. Like, I understand that it's not Caleb Williams' fault that he didn't start right away. Maybe he should have been starting from the outset. Maybe Lincoln Riley got it wrong. Certainly possible. Nobody's perfect. It's just hard for me to have a lot of faith in the Sooners when they had this drastic of a change. I mean, should Oklahoma be in the CFP? The answer is yes. I've got to be fair. They're an undefeated Big 12 team. There is literally no good reason for them to not be one of the top 4 teams in the league. I mean, the AP thinks so. The AP's top 4 is Georgia, Cincinnati, Alabama, Oklahoma. I'd flip-flop Alabama and Cincinnati, but I'm not going to go crazy over that. Oklahoma is 8, according to the committee. They're behind Michigan. They're behind Michigan State. No, that doesn't work for me. I mean, Oklahoma's a really good team. Not a great team, but a really good team. They have some talented players. Caleb Williams looks very, very good. He's completed over 71.5% of his passes for just under 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Kennedy Brooks is having a good year on the ground, over 800 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. Marvin Mims has 605 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. They do have some talented players. There's no question about that. As for Baylor, they're a very well-rounded team. Really good offense, really good defense. Give Dave Aranda a ton of credit. After a really bad year last year, where they went 2-7, the Bears are 7-2. Job well done by Aranda. Jerry Bohannon's having a solid year. He's completed 65% of his passes for just under 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Abram Smith is already a 1,000-yard back. He has 11 touchdowns. Treston Ebner is really good on the ground also. He has over 600 receiving yards. Tyquan Thornton and R.J. Sneed comprise one of the best wide receiver duos in the nation. They have really good defenders, Jalen Petre, Christian Morgan, Jaron McVay, Siaki Ika, Victor Obi, Terrell Bernard, TJ Franklin, Chidi Ogbenaya, etc., etc. This is a really good Baylor team. I mean, this game is in Waco. I like Baylor. I'm higher on them than most. I'm probably lower on Oklahoma than most. Even though I think they should be in the top 4, the eye test says that they shouldn't. It's weird. They're undefeated, so I can't leave them out in good conscience, but the eye test tells me that they should be out. It's strange. It's very strange. I can't explain it. But I don't think Oklahoma is going to be undefeated for much longer. I'm going to go with the upset here. Give me Baylor. Moving on now to Purdue OSU. Purdue's a weird team. Very tough to get a handle on them. They really don't have a great offense. They're only averaging 24.8 points per game. But they have a really talented receiver in David Bell. Someone who already has over 1,000 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. Their defense is really good, but outside of George Karlaftis, Branson Dean, and Dedrick Mackey, there's no Boilermaker that really knocks my socks off. But the Boilermakers do have the 16th best defense in the nation in terms of opposing points per game, under 18.5. They're a weird team, a very, very weird team. Meanwhile, OSU is really run roughshod all throughout this year. Oh my God, they lost to a great Oregon team. Yeah, okay. They've destroyed everyone else since. They do have a tough end to the season, though, I'll say that. Their last 3 games, Purdue, MSU, and Michigan, are all against ranked teams. And 4 of their last 5, because a couple weeks ago, they beat Penn State. CJ Stroud is having a great season. He's completed 67% of his passes for just under 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Travion Henderson can be a 1,000-yard back after this game. He's already at 937. He has 12 touchdowns. He can get 63 rushing yards against the Boilermakers tomorrow. That's very possible. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave comprise one of the best wide receiver trios in the nation. OSU's defense is chock full of playmakers, too many to go through. OSU is 21-point favorites. I understand that may seem high considering that they're going up against another ranked team. But Purdue isn't great, and this game is in the horseshoe. OSU is going to win this game, and they're going to win it comfortably. Will they cover the minus 21? I don't know, but I understand why that spread is as high as it is. Moving on now to Texas A&M versus Ole Miss. The Aggies remind me of the old Rex Ryan Jets, the ground and pound Jets. We're going to kill you on the ground, and we're going to make sure that you don't score a lot. They've got a good quarterback in Zach Calzada, although he's not great. Instead, the guys who you need to worry about on offense are the running backs, Isaiah Spiller and Devin Achane. Spiller has 873 rushing yards, Achane has 706. They both have 5 touchdowns. They're insane. Defensively, the Aggies have the second best defense in the nation in terms of opposing points per game. They've only given up 14.7 points per game this year. Obviously, Georgia is number 1 by a wide margin. They've only given up 6.6 points per game. But A&M has a great defense. Too many playmakers to go through. If I go through them all, we're going to be here until Thanksgiving. The Aggies may not be the most exciting team in the world, but they are a threat. There's no question about that. As for Ole Miss, I am going to be really interested in what Matt Corral does against this great Aggies defense. Him balling out will do a lot for his draft stock. If Corral dominates, he'll be my top quarterback for this coming draft. And guys like Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, and Malik Willis would need to do a lot to supplant Corral. And Corral would need to fall off a cliff also. I mean, a great game tomorrow night would go a long way for Corral. Can he do it? The answer is yes. He's an excellent dual threat quarterback. But it's going to be tough. This is going to be a very fun battle. Matt Corral versus the Aggies defense. I mean, Corral won't be doing this alone. He'll have some help. Henry Parrish Jr., Snoop Connor, and Jerry and Ely all have over 430 rushing yards. And Ontario Drummond is a very good wide receiver. 40 catches for 658 yards and 6 touchdowns. Granted, he is a little banged up. He didn't play last week. He's listed as questionable for this game. I don't know if he's going to play or not, but it's worth mentioning him. Give Lane Kiffin a ton of credit for what he's done to this Ole Miss offense. He's done a great job. There's no question about that. Defensively, I want you to focus on the Rebels secondary. Guys like DeAndre Prince, Miles Battle, Kadron Smith, AJ Finley, Jake Springer, Trey Washington. Ole Miss does have one of the best secondaries in the nation. The thing is, though, I don't know how much that's going to mean for Ole Miss in this game. The Aggies are going to try to ground and pound. How valuable can a secondary be in a game like that? It's tough. I could see this going either way. It wouldn't stun me if Ole Miss won, since the game is in Oxford. But I am going to go with the Aggies. Gig 'em. Moving on now to NC State versus Wake Forest. Now, I like NC State. I'm higher on them than most. I used to want to go there, actually. But life had other plans for me. The Wolfpack are a really good team this year. Give Dave Doran a ton of credit. He's one of the best coaches that NC State has ever had. Devin Leary is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the nation. He's completed 66% of his passes for just under 2,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. They have a really good two-headed monster at running back in Zonovan Knight and Ricky Person Jr. They've got a bunch of pass catchers that can kill you. Emeka Emezi, Thayer Thomas, Devin Carter, Porter Rooks, and Person is a good pass-catching running back. This is a really good Wolfpack team, but their defense is what really scares you. Drake Thomas, Shaheem Battle, Tyler Baker-Williams, Daniel Joseph, Corey Durden, Jakeem Harris, Isaiah Moore, Davin Van. It runs a mile long. The Wolfpack are by far and away one of the most underrated teams in the nation. But they're going to have their hands full against a once upon a time undefeated Demon Deacons team. Wake Forest lost last week. Before that, they were undefeated. They have the second best offense in the nation in terms of points per game. 44.7. Sam Hartman is having a fantastic season. He's completed 62.5% of his passes for just under 2,900 yards. He will get to 3,000 tomorrow. 27 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He may get 30 touchdowns. That's very possible. They've got a bunch of good running backs in Christian Beal, Justice Ellison, and Christian Turner. Jaquari Roberson and A.T. Perry are probably the best wide receiver duo in the nation. Their offensive line is sensational. One of the best in the nation. Zach Tom, Sean Magan, Michael Juergens, Loic Ngassam-Nie, and Devontae Gordon are absolutely amazing. Defensively, Wake Forest has some good playmakers. Trayvon Redd, Rondell Bothroyd, Kalen Carson, and Chase Jones are really, really, really good. This is going to be a dogfight. I'm really looking forward to this game. In my opinion, this is the game of the week. It's not A&M Ole Miss. It's not Oklahoma Baylor. It's not Purdue OSU. It's NC State versus Wake Forest. I saved the best for last. It wouldn't stun me if either team won. Don't be surprised if NC State wins, I'm telling you. But because Wake Forest is home, I'm going to pick the Demon Deacons. I will say this, though. NC State is not that far from Wake Forest. It's only like a 2-hour drive. I would do it. If I was a student at NC State, I'd do that drive in a heartbeat. Leave at 4:30ish. Make sure I'm at the game on time. Those roads are probably empty at night. Once you get away from the stadium, it's probably smooth sailing. Yeah, I would do that drive. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And we knew that Rob Manfred was an idiot. But we didn't know how much of an idiot. According to Evan Drellich and Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, Major League Baseball has proposed replacing arbitration with a formula that pays players based off what Fangraphs says their WAR is. So just to be clear, Major League Baseball is going to use a third-party service to determine how much their players are paid. I cannot tell you how stupid this is. Firstly, WAR is not a good stat, okay? I don't have time to go through all the problems with WAR. If you want me to, we'll be here until Christmas. But why are you using Fangraphs? What does Fangraphs have that Baseball Reference doesn't? Why wouldn't you make it a proprietary formula? Why are you basing something as important as players' salary on something as fickle as WAR? Again, I have a million arguments against WAR. Robinson Cano had a higher WAR than Miguel Cabrera's Triple Crown year. Joey Gallo had a higher WAR than Giancarlo Stanton this year. WAR doesn't work. And now you're going to pay players based on it? Here's how I know WAR doesn't work, okay? One of the core tenets of mathematics, and this encompasses all fields of mathematics: algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, statistics, etc., is that it's empirical. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. A squared plus B squared will always equal C squared. Nothing we do will ever change that. For WAR to be different based on what website you use shows how useless the stat is. It can't be a stat. Statistics are empirical. Batting average is hits divided by at-bats. A home run is a home run. An RBI is an RBI. A win is a win. A strikeout is a strikeout. An ERA is earned runs divided by innings pitched. WHIP, walks plus hits, divided by innings pitched. A stolen base is a stolen base. How can it be different? It makes no sense. It defies all logic of math. That's the problem with formula-based stats. Everyone has their own formula. So there's no one empirical answer. If there's no one empirical answer, it's fair to wonder how valuable the stat is. Here's the thing. If I'm a player and Fangraphs says I'm worth 3 WAR, but Baseball Reference says I'm worth 4, and I'm getting paid off that 3, I'm screaming bloody murder. Wait a minute. Why are you using this and not this higher valuation? Why wouldn't Major League Baseball have its own formula? Why are you using WAR, a meaningless stat, a fickle stat? A stat that, if it was up to me, would be outlawed from baseball. Any stat that tells you that Giancarlo Stanton wasn't as good as Joey Gallo last year is meaningless. WAR, in essence, tries to replace the eye test. But you can't replace the eye test. That's what makes sports great. What you see is different than what I see. I may weigh certain things more importantly than you do, and that's okay. But the idea that you can have this one overarching stat that's going to replace everything that is the be-all, end-all, when it's not even calculated the same way from website to website, is ridiculous. If I went to a mathematician and said, I have these two different formulas on how to evaluate baseball players, that mathematician would say, great, pick one. You're dealing with stats. You're dealing with fact. You're dealing with being definitive. How can it be different? WAR is a joke. Sabermetrics is a joke. Bill James absolutely ruined baseball. People who are beholden to analytics deserve what happens to them. Sadly, that includes my Yankees. This is without question the stupidest thing that Major League Baseball has ever proposed. It's bad enough that WAR exists, but to lend legitimacy to it by proposing that we pay players based off it is absurd. I don't know what idiot thought of that, but that person should be fired and should never be allowed to watch a baseball game again. Oh, but no, that doesn't matter to them, because the people who subscribe to Sabermetrics don't even watch the damn game. They're too busy inputting data on a computer to actually use their eyes. Idiots. Absolute idiots. Alright, here's my interview with David Kaiser. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by David Kaiser, the author of NFL 1965, The Most Exciting Season. David, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. In fact, I've just got some great news. I haven't received my copies quite yet, but the book apparently exists, and they're on my way to me, so if anybody is moved to try to order one, they can get it pretty quickly.
Yeah, pre-orders are available now on Amazon, set to come out a week from today. I'm excited about it.
Officially, it's already out, actually.
Oh, officially it's already out. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, that's right. I only just found that out myself. Yeah.
I was just looking at Amazon.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess they have to update that too. Okay.
So before we go into specific teams, let's talk about the 65 season itself. Which teams were the preseason favorites headed into the 65 season?
Well, the Browns were certainly the favorite in the Eastern Conference. There were only two conferences then, of course, although they were under pressure from the St. Louis Cardinals, who had come very close to them the year before. Now, in the West, the Colts had won easily the year before. They had lost a critical player, Gino Marchetti, but I think they were expected to do very well. The Vikings, who had a young team and mainly an offensive one at that point, and who had a strong season in 1964, were highly regarded, and Tex Small, the leading football writer of Sports Illustrated, had featured them in his season preview issue and thought they might win. The Packers had two disappointing years in a row, and 1964 was particularly disappointing. So they weren't especially highly touted at the beginning of the season. And the Bears, who had won the championship 2 years earlier in 63, had also had quite a mediocre 1964. But no one realized that they had just landed in the draft two of the greatest players in the history of the NFL.
Right. Who exactly were those two?
Dick Butkus, the middle linebacker, and Gale Sayers, the halfback, both of whom, of course, are in the Hall of Fame.
Never heard of them. I'm only kidding.
Right, yes.
So what can you tell us about the first month of the 65 season?
The first month was pretty straightforward. The Colts got off to a very good start by beating the Vikings, who had been highly touted. Then they went to Green Bay in what turned out to be really a critical game. in the season. And they lost that one by a very narrow margin, by 20-17. And in fact, Tom Matte, about whom we'll be talking, I'm sure, later, was involved in a critical play late in the game when Johnny Unitas was leading the team down the field to try to win it. And he hit Matte on a pass, but Matte was hit hard and fumbled the ball, and that was the end of the Colts' chances. But then the Colts won several games in a row, and the Bears got off to a terrible start with 3 losses in a row, although the third one of those losses was to the Packers, and they lost 23-14. And they easily could have won that game. They actually outgained the Packers by a wide margin, and Gale Sayers began to show what he could do in that game. But there were a lot of turnovers. Turnovers played a huge role in the NFL in those days. So they were 0-3, which seemed to put an end to any chances they had, with the Packers at that point 3-0. And in the East, actually the Cardinals got off to just as good a start as the Browns did, and beat the Browns in the first meeting between those two teams. But they were going to be hurt very badly by an injury to their quarterback, Charlie Johnson.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, Charlie Johnson was a very underrated player back then. People don't know him now, but Charlie Johnson was actually a pretty good player. Would you agree with that?
Oh, he was a very good player, and he had terrible luck. He got hurt in 1965. And he got hurt again in 1966 when they were leading the Eastern Conference, and he got put out for the rest of the season. And then he had to go in the military for a couple of years. He's a very interesting man who gave me a wonderful interview. He was a PhD in mathematics, I think, or in engineering, and he taught at the college level for many, many years before retiring. I really enjoyed talking to him.
All right. Sounds good.
Yep.
As the season progressed, which teams looked like serious championship threats?
Certainly the Colts and the Packers, but then the Bears suddenly emerged in Week 7 when they destroyed the Packers 31-10. And that showed that they could beat anybody. But that was the first game the Packers had lost that season. So there were two games behind the Packers at that point, 2 games behind the Colts. But they just got stronger and stronger after that. Meanwhile, the Browns were beginning to pull away in the East, and they weren't seriously threatened in the second half of the season. Although the Cowboys were just becoming the team that was going to dominate the Eastern Conference in the second half of the 60s and eventually make it into the Super Bowl. But they were having their ups and downs, and they finished with a 7-7 record. They looked like they might make a fight of it against the Browns, but they lost a critical game in Dallas when Don Meredith threw a couple of interceptions. Really,
Dandy Don wasn't so dandy.
No, he wasn't. I always felt he was a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. I mean, I was a Redskins fan, and the Redskin team had a lot of problems, particularly on defense. But they had Sonny Jurgensen, who we all felt, and I still feel, was as good a passer as there was in the league.
No question.
Yeah, and Meredith was not as good as he. That Meredith, though, had another terrible problem, which he talked about a lot in later years. Tom Landry had designed the offense. Tom Landry called all the plays. And Meredith frequently did not believe in those plays. And it's a very bad situation when a quarterback is trying to execute a play that he doesn't think is going to work. And that got them into trouble at some critical moments. But anyway, one of the amazing things about the season was the incredible dominance of the Western Conference. You have 4 teams who had been great powers in the league for quite a while. The Colts, the Packers, the Bears, and the Lions, who were always bridesmaids, never brides, after 1957, but who had a very fine team. And at the same time, in 1965, you have 3 other much younger teams, the Vikings, the Rams, and the 49ers, who are coming on strong and who are going to become quite dominant in the late 60s, early 70s. And as a result, okay, there was one interconference game every week in the 14th week season. And one of the amazing things about the season, as I remember noticing at the time, the West won 13 out of those 14 games.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't notice that at the time, but yeah, now that I'm looking at the schedules, yeah. And the West was just exponentially better than the East that year. The Cleveland Browns were really the only good team in the East that year.
Well, as I say, Dallas was coming on, and St. Louis would have been if they hadn't had the injuries. But basically, that was true. But the East had several seriously weak sisters. The
Steelers were dreadful that year.
The Steelers were dreadful. The Redskins had a lot of strange problems. Actually, more on offense than defense, despite all the talent they had.
Yeah.
And
Giants weren't
the
anything
Eagles.
special.
The Eagles were very up and down. Yeah.
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 Also, the Giants weren't anything special.
Oh, yes, the Giants were nothing to write home about, although they improved a lot. And again, that was a memory of mine. You see, I was living in the Boston area, and the CBS, the Giants were the home team for New England from the standpoint of CBS. So that's what we saw every year. And that had been great for New Englanders until 1964, when the Giants were just awful. I think they were 3-11. And I remember it took 2 games for the Giants to score a touchdown in 1965. And the announcer, I think it was Jack Whitaker, said, "And the Giants score their first touchdown of the 1965 season." And the way he said it, I got the distinct feeling that he was afraid that might never happen at that moment. But Earl Morrall had a fine year with them, and they had a terrific rookie, Homer Jones, wide receiver, and another very fine rookie, Tucker Fredrickson, who actually had been the number 1 pick in the draft. The Giants had drafted him over Sayers, over Butkus, over lots of people. And
yeah, that didn't work out too well.
Well, actually, it didn't. He was not Gale Sayers. Nobody was. But he had a very fine 1965 season. Then he had a lot of injuries, and he was never that good again.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, decent player, made a Pro Bowl, but not Sayers, not Butkus.
No.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talking to David Kaiser, the author of NFL 1965, the most exciting season. So can you lay out the dogfight that happened in the Western Conference toward the end of the 65 regular season?
All right. As I said, the Packers led for 4 weeks before they lost their first game. At that point, they went into a terrible slump, particularly on offense. And they had a period of, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks in which they scored 1 touchdown a week. And actually, they were very lucky to win a couple of those games, although they lost a couple of them. And the Colts were going great guns. And the Colts had, at one point, a 2-game lead over them. And Vince Lombardi was getting very upset with life. The Colts played a great game. Again, the Colts also, that's right, this is one of the remarkable games of the year and a historic game. The Colts beat the Bears in a close game in Chicago. This was after the Bears had beaten the Packers and after the Bears had suddenly showed that they were really special. And there were some controversial officials' calls in that game, which the Colts wound up winning just 26-21. Now, Unitas got hurt in that game. I think he got a bruise in his back or something. And the next week they had to play the Vikings, who were on a winning streak, in Minnesota. The Colts did. And that I still remember like it was yesterday, frankly, because that was the first doubleheader game, first regular doubleheader game shown on CBS. In other words, all we had seen basically were the Giants during this fantastic season until then. And that day, the Giants played the Browns and were beaten badly by them. And then we go straight to Minnesota where the game has just started. And I was as excited as I could be. But it turned out Unitas was not playing because he was hurt. And his backup, Gary Cuozzo, was playing. And they had a very close first half in that game. And then Cuozzo had a fantastic second half. And the Colts also pulled a beautiful strategic onside kick, not at the end of the game, but when they had just taken the 2-touchdown lead, and they rapidly turned it into a 3-touchdown lead, and it became a rout. And Quazzo threw 5 touchdown passes, something Unitas had never done. And then they won again, so now they are 9-1. And on Thanksgiving, they had to play the Lions in what turned out to be a wild game in Detroit, and they were tied in that game. At that point, so now, I'm sorry, they had only had a 1-game lead in the Packers. That's right, I believe at that point. So now they're only a half game against the Packers, but the Packers are in Los Angeles on the following Sunday, and they get beaten pretty soundly by the Rams, which leads to Vince Lombardi going absolutely crazy on Tuesday, and a revolt in which 2 of the Packers were ready to punch him out, but it seemed to turn their season around after that. So now the Colts are still a game and a half ahead. Bears lost 4 games now. So the Bears are 2.5 games back, and the Bears come into Chicago to play the Colts the week after Thanksgiving on December 5th. And with the score 0-0, 2 of the Bears linemen put Unitas out of the game and out of the season with torn ligaments. And Sayers scores a long touchdown run, and the Bears win that game 13-0. Actually, Quazzo nearly got the Colts back into that game in the second half, throwing a long touchdown pass, but it was called back, and it wound up as a shutout. So now their lead over the Packers is down to half a game, and as luck would have it, the Packers are coming to Baltimore to play the next to last game of the season. And Don Shula, who's already the Colts coach in his 3rd full year, is very upbeat. He says, we have every confidence in Quazzo. And again, that game was on TV. It was played in the fog. Now, Lombardi, whose offense still hadn't really gotten straightened out, took the team to Maryland at the beginning of the week, and they practiced away from Green Bay all week. And somehow, I've got to hand it to Lombardi, they became the great Packer team again, and the offense played a fantastic game. Just before the half, it looked like the Colts were going to go ahead. It was 14-13, Packers. There had been a turnover, and the Colts were trying to score the go-ahead touchdown. And Quazzo tried to throw a pass into the flat to his fullback, Jerry Hill. The great Dave Robinson, who was a wonderful interview, by the way, and remembered this perfectly, great athlete at left linebacker, got in front of Hill and made a fantastic leaping interception and almost ran it all the way into the Baltimore end zone. He returned it about 90 yards. And then the Packers did score. Then they came out in the second half. And here's where we get into the real climax of the season, because the Packers promptly managed to put Quazzo out of the game as well. And who has to come in at quarterback but Tom Matty, a halfback, actually a reserve halfback at this point, who hasn't played. He's been in the league 4 or 5 years, and he hasn't played quarterback. He's never played quarterback in the NFL. The last time he played quarterback was at Ohio State.
I've always been curious about this.
Yes.
Why didn't the Colts sign another quarterback after Unitas got hurt?
Well, no. After Unitas got hurt, they still had Quazzo.
Right, but you need a backup to Quazzo in case something happens to him.
Well, I guess they just figured that was so unlikely. That is an interesting question, but it didn't come up at that point.
Okay. So just no one thought this would happen, so we're not even going to...
Yeah, I think that's true. And there was some evidence that the Packers really were determined to get Quazzo out of the game.
I don't blame them.
They did. Yes, exactly. Right. And he was kind of lifted up by Willie Davis, I think, and slammed to the ground. What is amazing, though, okay, so Matty comes into the game, and Matty told this wonderful story to George Plimpton, the great writer, about 5 years later when Plimpton...
Paper Lion.
Yes, but 5 years later he was working on what became the second football book, Mad Ducks and Bears, and he was training with the Colts. And he got to know all the Colts very well. And so Matty says he came into the game, and he decided he was going to shock the Packers by passing. on first down. And so he looks at Jimmy Orr, one of the two great Colt receivers, and also his roommate, and he says, "Well, Jimmy, what have you got for me over there?" In other words, where can you get open? And Orr just looks at him and says, "Well, actually, I'm on the wide side of the field, and I don't think you could throw the ball that far." So, so then he turns to Raymond Berry, the even greater Colt receiver in some ways. He says, "What about you, Raymond?" Barry says, no, I haven't got anything for you either. He says, "Why don't you run the ride 38? And Matty says, "What are you talking about? That's a running play to the other side of the field. You don't even have to block on that play." And Barry says, "Yeah, I don't feel like blocking right now." So they run one series. Now, the incredible thing, which I have remembered all through these years, but everybody else forgot, is that, okay, by this time the Packers were 3 touchdowns ahead, I think. But Quazzo then comes back into the game with his separated left shoulder shot full of Novocaine and leads the Colts to 2 touchdowns and gets them within 8 points. But then they have to kick off to the Packers after that. The Colt defense stops the Packers on 2 downs, and on 3rd down, Paul Hornung comes out of the backfield running a slant up the middle, and I think this was a play that Lombardi described in his earlier book, where all the wide receivers spread and the tight end spread the defense out to leave this hole in the middle for Hornung. And there was one Colt defender near him, Jerry Logan, and there's film of this on YouTube. There's film of a lot of these games on YouTube now. And he tried for an interception. He cut in front of Hornung and leapt, but he missed the ball completely, and Hornung took it in stride and went 70 yards or so for a touchdown and a 15-point lead. And that was that. So now the Packers are a half game ahead. The Bears have an amazing day that day, too, in which they beat the 49ers 61-20 in Chicago, and Sayers scores 6 touchdowns. The Bears have one chance to tie the Packers if the Packers lose their last game against San Francisco, and if the Colts lose their last game against Los Angeles, which is on Saturday. And that's their only chance. So the last weekend kicks off with the Colts in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is on a hot streak. They've had a new quarterback for the last 3 weeks, Roman Gabriel, who was going to be a big star in years to come, and he had won 3 games in a row against 3 very good teams, against the Packers, against the Cardinals, and against the Browns, whom they had destroyed because the Browns had already clinched the title and probably were just partying in Los Angeles. So this is who the Colts have to go up against, and the Rams have the fearsome foursome: Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen, Rosie Greer, and Lamar Lundy. And Matty, again in his conversation with Plimpton, Matty was about 5'10", and he said the toughest thing about that game was that he couldn't see over the fearsome foursome. I mean, he felt like he couldn't even see into the secondary. But the Colts designed this game plan based on Matty running the ball, and he gains almost 100 yards. And it's a wild game. Meanwhile, the Colts have managed to pick up a veteran quarterback during that week, late in that week, Ed Brown from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He doesn't join the team until Friday, so he has exactly 1 week to prepare. And he plays a few series of downs while Matty plays most of the game, running the ball. And in one of these series, in the huddle, John Mackey and he, the great tight end, plan the play. They draw the pattern in the sand, and Mackey runs a slant and beats the Rams secondary and takes the ball in from 60 yards out or so, and which is a key play in the game. And Matty does some great running. He gained almost 100 yards. And at the end of that game, the Colts are leading 20-17. Gabriel is driving down the field, and he gets inside the 10-yard line. And I heard from one of the Bears, Andy Livingston, the Bears are watching this game because if the Rams can beat the Colts, they still have a chance. And Gabriel could just keep the ball on the ground and get a field goal for a tie, which would almost certainly put the Colts back out, but that isn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to beat them, and he tried for a touchdown pass, and Bobby Boyd, a great cornerback who led the league in interceptions that year, gets the second interception of the game, so the Colts win that game. And now they're a half game behind the Packers, and the Packers have to play in San Francisco the next day. And the Colts and their front office, my friend Upton Bell, who I've gotten to know quite well lately, who was then a scout for the Colts, they watched the game at the CBS station in Baltimore via closed circuit. For some reason, CBS didn't carry that game nationally, although I don't know why. Now, John Brody, now the 49ers, I haven't talked about the 49ers. The 49ers had, by a considerable margin, the best offense in the league. They had great running backs, Ken Willard, who was a rookie, and John David Crow. John Brody,
trophy winner John David Crow.
Yes, that's right. They had Dave Parks was the top receiver in the league, the split end. Bernie Casey was a great flanker. And they had a good offensive line. Their defense was kind of so-so, and they lost several high-scoring close games. But they were psyched for this game, the way teams often are, when they are out of things themselves, but they have a chance to affect the championship. And again, it was a very close game, and there was a fantastic episode late in the first half. The 49ers were ahead 7-3, and they were driving for another touchdown. And John Brody tried to pitch the ball out to John David Crow, and it sort of went through his hands, and Willie Wood, the Packers safety, picked it up and ran it about 80 yards for a touchdown. Almost exactly the same thing Dave Robinson had done the week before. So it looked like the Packers were in the lead. The Packers are lining up to kick the extra point, and John Brody, the 49er quarterback, comes running on the field up to the official with the rule book saying, no, the touchdown doesn't count. That was a lateral, not a fumble. And the film, I think, confirms that. And you can't advance a lateral. And the official, believe it or not, looks at the rule book and says, you're right. And so they take the ball back up the field. Now, again, on the field, you can see Lombardi, this short, squat guy, dressed in his beautiful camel's hair coat and his top hat. He comes onto the field. He's about 10 yards out of the field, screaming at the official, as he often did.
Yeah,
but to no avail. So then there are a lot of great plays in that game. Jim Johnson, the 49er cornerback, one of the best in the league, and the brother of Rafer Johnson, who won the Olympic decathlon, made a fantastic interception to take a scoring chance away from the Packers, coming up from behind and leaping and taking it right out of the hands of Carroll Dale. And but finally, the Packers are ahead with under 2 minutes to go. They go ahead 24-17. And Brody moves the ball down the field with a couple of passes to Dave Parks, and he's inside the 20, I think. And the tight end, Monty Stickles, had gotten hurt in the previous series. And he is replaced by a guy named Vern Burke. And I was very sad because I was tracking these players down, and I got a phone number for Vern Burke out of a database, but he never answered. I don't know what that was about.
He doesn't like you.
No, whatever. I don't know. But anyway, Vern Burke had caught exactly one pass all season. He hadn't played much. But Brody calls a play that isolates him against Doug Hart, the right cornerback, who's the weak spot in the Packers secondary. And he beats Doug Hart, and there's no other Packer anywhere near him in the end zone. And they score the tying touchdown. And then they stop the Packers, and in fact, it looks like they might have a chance to win the game. But there was some confusion about the clock. The official time was still kept on the field in those days. The clock and the time on the scoreboard wasn't official. And Brody called what looked like the same play to Burke, but he overthrew the pass a little, and Burt caught it out of bounds. And then before they could get off another play, they were just inside midfield, I think. Time ran out, so it was 24-24. It was so. I was now overseas. My family was living in London, so I was following this from afar. But when I saw the newspaper, I just couldn't believe it. That this was the only way the Packers and the Colts could tie, if the Packers tied the 49ers. But that is what had happened.
And no overtime in those days.
No overtime except in the championship game or the playoff.
Right.
As we're about to see.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. But before we get into that, let's talk about the teams that were in them. How would you describe the 65 Colts? I know you've done it a little bit here and there throughout this interview, but I'd like you to go a little more in depth on them if you can.
Okay. Tremendous offensive team when they had a quarterback. Actually, several very good running backs. And Unitas is still the best passer in the league. Actually, Shula was trying to make them into more of a running team, and there was a lot of tension between Shula and Unitas over that. So they, with their number one or even number two quarterback, they have an offense that's as good as anybody in the league. And Lenny Moore is very effective as a running back and catching passes out of the backfield. And Barry and Orr are great receivers. And John Mackey is tremendous at tight end, and if anything, I think could have been used more.
Right.
He was. Right. Now, the defense, though, was not an overpowering defense because they in the late 50s when they won 2 championships, they had Gino Marchetti, who was the greatest defensive end in history at that point. They had Art Donovan, another strong defensive tackle, and they had Big Daddy Lipscomb, one of the biggest players in the NFL. And they had some tough guys at linebacker. Now, by 1965, Donovan's retired, Marchetti's retired, Lipscomb had been traded and then died of a heroin overdose under very suspicious circumstances. And the replacements they have are good players, but they're not those overwhelming physical specimens. They have a very smart defense. They have a very smart team, actually. And these guys spend a lot of time together watching movies. The ones I interviewed all talked about that. And they have a superb coaching staff, which includes not only Shula, but Chuck Noll, who's an assistant. Was
that right? Chuck Noll was an assistant that year? I didn't know that.
Yes, he was. And Charlie Winter, who became a successful head coach.
Boo,
Yeah,
Charlie Winter.
Okay.
I'm a Jets fan. Boo.
Oh, all right. But anyway, but the defense isn't overpowering, although they're very smart.
Right.
And they have a new middle linebacker, Dennis Gaubats, who's been very effective. And in the secondary, the only great athlete in the secondary is their right cornerback, Lenny Lyles. But Boyd, again, is very clever. Jerry Logan is very clever, but they can be beat. So that's their weakness. And they had some injuries to key players in the defense in mid-season, and that's probably why they had that tie with the Lions, because Amos Marsh, a running back for the Lions, had an amazing day, and I can still see it. He ran a routine off tackle to the left, about 80 yards for a touchdown. I don't think anybody touched him, but that was partly because a couple of guys were missing. Bill Curry, who I did a wonderful interview with, he was a backup center for the Packers then, and he played another year for the Packers, and then Lombardi traded him to the Colts. And he said when he went to the Colts, he came to love the Colts and went to the Super Bowl with the Colts twice. But the first time he was in the locker room, he was kind of shocked because with just one or two exceptions, they just didn't have the incredible physical specimens that the Packers had. So that's what I would say about the Colts. But I also think it's a fact that the Colts had terrific spirit, and they really did respect Shula, young as he was. I mean, he was only a few years older than Unitas and some of the others. And they really, here they are in this crazy situation, and they really have nothing to lose because nobody thinks they can win, whether they're full-time quarterback, and they want to prove that they can.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what can you tell us about their opponent that year, the Green Bay Packers?
Well, as I say, they had a very strange year, and Lombardi never liked to give any credit to anybody, but if he had been honest, at the end of the year when they had won, he would have said, well, I really have to thank Phil Bengtson, it was coach of the defense, because he and the defense carried the team for most of the season, which was a fact.
Right.
I mean, the offense was Lombardi's guys. Now, again, they had a lot of injuries, and they had gotten older, and they were missing some key linemen for a lot of the season. But they managed to pull it together for that one fantastic game against the Colts.
I mean, the offense that year overall for the Packers was middle of the pack, but that defense was absolutely sensational. Willie Davis, Herb Adderley, Willie Wood, Leroy Caffey, sensational year by the defense.
And Robinson.
Dave Robinson,
absolutely.
sure.
Yes,
Ray
and
Nitschke.
Yes, that's right. They were.
Yeah.
They were.
Lionel Aldridge also.
Yes, and Kostelnik, right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, two weak spots in the secondary, I would say, which were exploited. Doug Hart at the right cornerback, and Tom Brown, the strong safety.
Yeah, not great.
Adderley, though, was really just fantastic.
And a nice guy, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, really? You met him? I did not. I had a wonderful interview with Gary Collins, though.
Really?
Cleveland. Yeah. And Collins showed a lot of respect for a lot of people, but he said, I owned Herb Adderley. He said he was a great quarterback, but he just couldn't do it against me. And he knew it.
I met Herb Adderley at
Okay.
a signing in Chicago, and he asked me what my expertise was. In other words, what did I do for a living? Well, idiot Jacob over here, being starstruck, said, oh, I'm pretty good. I'm okay. I know my stuff. It's like, no, what do you do for a living? I'm trying to have a conversation with you. You're not helping me here.
Oh, gosh. That's funny. What was the answer? What was the answer, by the way? I'm curious.
What was the answer? The answer was this. I do this. I'm a student, stuff like that.
Okay, right.
Video editor, yeah.
Okay, right. Now, again, you see, the evidence was, and I remember a lot of talk about this at the time, that if either of those teams had to play the Bears in the last game of the season, they were probably going to lose.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen because the Bears had lost those 3 games right at the beginning. Yeah.
Well, you had both those teams banged up, and the Bears were relatively healthy. So
That's right. But I mean, the Bears had destroyed the Packers the second time out, and they had beaten the Colts 13-0 the second time out. And although the Bears they were eliminated when the Colts beat the Rams, and they had to play the Vikings the next day, and they did lose that game narrowly. But I'm sure that if they'd still had a chance, it probably would have been different.
Yeah.
But they wound up 9-5. The tragedy was, and nobody would have ever guessed this, neither Sayers nor Butkus ever got that close to the postseason again or played on a team anywhere near that good again.
Right.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talking to David Kaiser, the author of NFL 1965, the most exciting season. So now let's get into that famous playoff game, something that's back in the NFL consciousness now that Tom Maddy is unfortunately no longer with us.
I know.
Can you lay out that playoff game?
I certainly can, and the Colts both teams have prepared very carefully. Shula and the Colts made it. Now again, they can't use Ed Brown because he was added too late in the season to be in the playoffs. So Matty is going to have to play, and they make a decision that basically they're not going to pass, which I think turned out to be a mistake. And we'll get into my reasoning behind that a little later, maybe. But that's their decision. They're going to run. They're going to try to rely on Matty running, and they're going to try to rely on the defense. The Packers.
I'm sorry for cutting you off, but the thing
That's
about
right.
that offense under Matty is it would actually be kind of familiar today, I feel like, to college football fans.
Absolutely. Yes. That's right.
Yeah, you watch option football
Right.
in college every Saturday, and that's basically what the Packers did in '65, or excuse me, what the Colts did in '65 under Tom Matty. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yes, I do. And in fact, Dan Sullivan, who was a lineman in the Colts, and he's practically a neighbor of mine, although I wasn't able to go see him for the interview because of COVID. I plan to go see him and give him a copy of the book. He's a very smart guy and very funny. He brought that up. He said, I think Tom was the first modern quarterback.
I'm sure he was.
Right. And the Packers, Dave Robinson told me, they knew what was coming, and Robinson told me we were in a goal line defense every play of that game, he said.
Yeah.
But now, as I said in the book, I've been a big sports fan of various sports for a long time, 60 years or so, more like 65. And I didn't actually see the playoff, you see, because, again, I was over in England, alas. But reading about it the next day and looking back on my life as a fan, there have been two athletic contests, one another football playoff game and one a soccer game, a World Cup final, that opened up with a really incredibly shocking event that simply turned the odds on their head. And that's what happened in the playoff game, because the Colts kick off, the Packers have the ball in the 20, Starr goes back to pass, and he completes the pass over the middle to his tight end, Bill Anderson. Anderson is immediately hit with a crushing tackle by Lenny Lyles, and he fumbles. And the linebacker, Don Shinnick, is trailing the play. He picks up the ball and takes off down the right sideline. He's only got 30 yards to go. And as he crosses the goal line, Bart Starr is coming over. And Bart Starr, even as a quarterback, was not a big guy. And he decides to try to make the tackle. And another Colt collides with him and bruises his back. And Starr limps off the field. So, in one play, the Colts are ahead 7-0, and they have somewhat evened up the odds because Bart Starr is out of the game. Granted, actually, Starr had been hurt a number of times during the year, and Zeke Bartkowski, the backup, had already done well. But he isn't Bart Starr, so this is really just an unbelievable beginning. And Dave Robinson told me that they were really stunned. So then the Packers are unable to do much for a good deal of the first half, and the Colts, Matty does run a wonderful play, and again, there's a highlight film of this game on YouTube. There is no commentary on it, but that just makes it more dramatic. It's played to music, and you see all this. Matty makes a wonderful play. It's his finest hour, where he has gone back to pass, and the two Green Bay ends are closing in on him, and he's turned sideways with his right arm forward, and he manages to flip the ball over their head to Lenny Moore, who grabs it and gains about 15 yards, and then they get close enough for a field goal, and they go ahead 10-0. And Upton Bell, who's there on the sidelines watching, he said to me when I interviewed him, when Unitas went out, I didn't think we had a chance, but when we went ahead 10-0, I thought, oh my God, we're actually going to win. And then the Packers do have a long drive, I think with the help of a somewhat dubious pass interference call, and they get down to a 2nd and goal, I think, on the 1, and they run 3 plays, and they do not try for a field goal, and they can't score. It's one of the great goal line stands of all time. And now one of the things, watching these highlight films, in some ways it's the same game, but the atmosphere is very different. And the biggest difference is the players don't celebrate. It's all business. And it's a wonderful, inspiring thing to watch, I think, nowadays. And even spiking the ball on a touchdown hadn't come in. But when the Packers hold them on that, one of the Colts just leaps up for joy, and they all do, and they run off the field just on top of the world, and with good reason. So it's 10-0 at the half. And then in the second half, the Packers do score one touchdown, and Bratkowski moves them quite well, but there are a couple of big interceptions. I mean, the Colts defense just keeps coming up with a big play. And then, with just a few minutes left, the Packers basically have one more chance to tie or win the game. They're down 10-7. And there's a big play, a very controversial officials call, when Bratkowski is back to pass. It may be third down. I can't remember. But at any rate, they're not doing well. And he's rushed, and Billy Ray Smith swings his arm and hits him in the helmet, which was not, I don't think, an automatic penalty in those days. And Bratkowski goes down like he's been poleaxed, and the official throws a flag. And the interesting thing about this is that in the argument that follows, the official clearly seems to be gesturing to show that Smith had grabbed Bratkowski's face mask, which he hadn't. Okay, that was a penalty, but he hadn't done that. So they get 15 yards out of that, and that keeps the drive going. And eventually, they're down around the 20, the 25, and the Colts do stop them, leading 10-7. And Don Chandler comes up to try the tying field goal. Now here, thank God for NFL Films, that film that I talked about, there may be two versions of it on YouTube, and one of them does have commentary. I'm not sure. But at any rate, they have a perfect end zone shot from behind the end zone of that field goal. And he missed. He knew he missed. You can see that too. He turned away in disgust. And actually, Chandler gave an interview 30 years later in which he said, yeah, I missed that one. And you can see the Colts trying to signal no good. This is in Green Bay, and the official calls it good. And all I can say is, watch it, slow motion it on YouTube, which you can do, and you tell me that he made that field goal because he did.
I was going to say the official developed cataracts midway through the kick.
Or something. I don't know. And actually, in the off season, the NFL suddenly announced that they were putting another 10 feet on the goalposts. Okay. But of course, that had nothing to do with what had happened in the playoff game. So,
right.
So then they go into overtime, the second overtime in the history of the NFL. And again, the Colts are the first one to get a drive going. And they get inside the 50. I think they're around the 40. And Lou Michaels, the Colt field goal kicker, was very feared. And he could kick it from over 50 yards. He had done that, including during the season. And some of the Packers said they were terrified when he lined up to try to win the game of the field goal. But the center snap was less than perfect. They did get the kick off, but the snap kind of fouled up the timing, and he missed it. Actually, I think they got into position for that with the help of a great punt return by Alvin Haymond. The Colts were also ahead of the rest of the league on special teams, and they had a lot of big kickoff and punt returns during the year, and that was one of them. And then the Packers did get off a real drive and did get it down the field in the field goal range. And this time, Chandler did make it, so they won 13-10, and that got them into the title game.
Okay, now you said that the Colts should have had Tom Matte throw the ball more. Why did you say that?
I said that because 2 weeks later, they were in the playoff bowl against the Cowboys. And obviously, the playoff bowl was regarded as kind of a joke. It was between the second-place teams. It was for nothing but pride and about $500 a player. So they're up against the Cowboys, who do have a good defense. But Shula, turned them loose. And Matty threw quite a bit in that game, and he was fabulous. He threw 2 long touchdown passes. So, and they won the game, I think, 35-3 or something like that. There were a lot of turnovers, too. That kept the West's near-perfect record alive against the East. And Matty actually said in the locker room after the first game, maybe we should have passed more. And I think that what he showed he was able to do against the Cowboys showed that was true. Yeah.
Not fair. I can't.
I wouldn't have thrown anything to the side with Herb Adderley, okay?
No, definitely not.
But,
you don't throw
to Raymond Berry on the other side, or to Mackey, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So, how would you describe the 65 Browns, the team that the Packers ended up facing in the championship?
They've got the greatest player in the NFL. They've got Jimmy Brown, and any team with Jimmy Brown is a threat. They have a fine offensive line. Ernie Green, who I had a wonderful interview with, very interesting guy who had a very successful career as an industrialist after he retired, was their other running back, and he was a great blocker. Yes, and there's something that I didn't put in the book, I don't think. I asked him, how he felt about his role in the team, and he gave a very eloquent answer, as you may remember, about how ever since he was a kid in a large family, he had learned that, you had to do whatever your job was. But I also asked him, how was Jim Brown as a blocker when you carried the ball? And he simply burst out laughing. And that was the end of that. He
didn't want to block for anyone.
He didn't block a lot. He could block on pass plays, but yeah. But anyway, so that's a huge asset, and they have a very fine offensive line. Frank Ryan is a dangerous quarterback, and you see Frank Ryan was the hero of the title game the year before when he threw 3 touchdown passes to Gary Collins. And the Browns had Gary Collins, who was a tremendous receiver of the flanker back type, partly just because he was so tall. He caught a lot of touchdown passes that the defensive back simply couldn't reach. They had another great receiver, Paul Warfield, although Warfield missed more than half the season, I think, because he broke his collarbone in the college all-star game. But Warfield was back by the time of the championship.
Right.
Their defense, again, was only adequate. And they were a ball-hawking defense, but again, they didn't have an overwhelming defensive line or linebackers.
Bill Glass was good, but other than him...
Yeah, they were good, and...
Paul Wiggin was solid, too.
Yeah, Paul Wiggin was solid, and I think the tackles were in transition, and they were getting better. But they weren't overpowering, but again, they had shown what they could do against the Colts, who were heavily favored in 1964. And on a windy day in Cleveland, the Browns had taken them apart, and it was basically the same team. And now they have to play in Green Bay, and in those days, where the title game was going to be, it had nothing to do with the records of the team. It alternated between the Western Conference winner and the Eastern Conference winner. So this year was the turn of the Western Conference. Now, what had a big effect in that game, according to all the Browns I talked to, was the weather, which was awful. And it was it had snowed, but it had warmed up a bit by the game. It was raining, and the field was an absolute disaster. And Ernie Green, in particular, said it was just about the most uncomfortable game he ever had on a football field, because every time you fell, you were falling in this awful, wet slush. But I think the key to that game, which the Browns were originally ahead in, was that Frank Ryan was determined to be the great hero again. And I was able to speak to Frank Ryan on a phone call, but it turns out he's not well, so I couldn't really interview him. But anyway, Brown, in the end, carried the ball, I think, 12 times in that game. And Ryan threw an awful lot of passes, many of which did not go well, partly because of the weather. Meanwhile, Horning had a very good day on the ground again, his second good day of the year. Lombardi always said Horning was a great money player, and he proved it again. And the Packers had some luck. They scored their first touchdown, and again, there's a lot of film of this game, almost complete, actually, on YouTube. And they scored their first touchdown when Carroll Dale was being double covered on a pattern. And Starr underthrew the ball a bit, and everybody had to come back for the ball, both Dale and the two defensive backs, and both of them slipped and fell. And he took it and went all the way for a touchdown. And that was a big play in that game. But the Packers were somewhat superior, and they wound up winning 23-12. But it wasn't a really distinguished performance. And again, if the Browns, also Green got hurt and had to leave the game. But if the Browns had kept the ball on the ground and gone to Brown more, I have to think that and controlled the ball, I have to think it might have been different, but we'll never know.
One guy who was also great in that game was Jim Taylor. Taylor actually had more carries than Paul Horning.
Yes, he also had a good day. He had been hurt a good deal of the year, and he was no longer the dominant player he had been. But he was definitely good in that game. Yes, right.
27 carries for 96 yards, and Paul Horning, 18 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown.
Right.
That's pretty darn good to me.
That's right. So they controlled it on the ground in the way that the Browns did not. And, of course, we didn't know it then. Nobody did. But that turned out to be Jim Brown's last game as a Brown and his next to last game in the NFL.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Talking to David Kaiser, the author of NFL 1965, The Most Exciting Season. And, David, I'll get you on this. Since he just died, I must ask you this. Can you lay out your experiences with Tom Matte?
It was really great talking to Tom Matte, and I've now dedicated the book to him.
Very classy.
He was a very smart guy. His memory was still good. The only symptom of age, which a lot of us get in the interview, was he repeated himself a lot. But, when I asked him a question, he answered it, and he had very sharp memories of the game and of these games and of a lot of other things as well. He, too, had been very successful later in life, I think, as working as a salesman for some sort of electronic equipment firm, I think. I could be mistaken about that, but it was something like that. And you can see him, there's a great documentary about the worst day of his life, Super Bowl III, the worst day of all the Colts' life.
Oh, come on. That was one of the best days of my life, and I wasn't even born yet.
I'm sure it was, yes. And he's very impressive in that documentary. And he was just a very smart guy and a very smart player. He said, you see, the secret of most of his career with the Colts was that he and Unitas could read defenses the same way. So they had a pass that was called a Matte option. And all that would happen in that is that he would line up in the backfield. He would look at the defense, and based on the defense, he would figure out where he was going to go. And Unitas would be doing the same thing, looking at the defense and figuring out in the same way exactly where Matte was going to go. And Matte said, I would run the pattern and turn around, and there the ball was, because 90% of the time we would be on exactly the same page.
Right.
And he had a wonderful year late in his career in the late 60s where he gained almost 1,000 yards, I think, which was much more than – that must have been 68 or 69.
69.
69? Okay, right. And that showed what he could do. So I wish I could have met him face to face, but I really enjoyed talking to him on the phone. And I'm just, you see, books like this. This isn't going to change my life in any way. I had wanted to write this book for decades, literally. I wish I had done it decades earlier, when I could have talked to so many more people. But I did do it, and the main thing I'm looking forward to now is getting the reactions of the players I interviewed, and I'm going to get them each a copy of the book as soon as I get the copies myself. And it's awful for me that he will not be one of them. But
well, look at it this way: the fact that you wrote it when you did meant that you were able to be interviewed by me. So I hope that's a silver lining.
Certainly, that's a silver lining, and I've enjoyed it very much. Yes.
All right, David. Thank you so much for your time.
Not at all, and thank you for seeking me out.
All right. That was David Kaiser. His book is NFL 1965, The Most Exciting Season. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. You'll get a New York Jets instant recap right after their game against the Bills. Monday night, you're going to get a New York Islanders show. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Monday's episode will feature an interview that I'm going to do with Ed Groover, the author of The Ice Bowl. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.